The twin suns of planet Vorek burned hot in the sky. Dry winds blew across the cracked red earth. Strange black rocks stood like broken teeth across the land. The sky was clear, but death walked silently on the ground below. A tall alien stood, on a rocky ledge, looking down at a group of warriors. His skin was gray and rough, like stone. He wore armor made of bones. His name was Chief Garzul, the leader of the warrior race called the Korun. Beside him stood a human, dirty, bruised, and tied in ropes. His name was Daniel Rourke, a soldier from Earth. He had been captured during a scouting mission near Korun territory. He stood straight, even with his hands tied, and stared at the chief without fear. Chief Garzul raised his voice. "This human entered our land without honor. He is weak. His kind hides behind machines and walls. But the Korun face beasts, with bare hands and win. Let him face the trial of dust and bone." The Korun warriors shouted in agreement. They banged their weapons on the ground. Dust flew into the air like smoke. Daniel didn't understand all their words, but he understood the look in their eyes. They thought he would die. A younger Korun warrior whispered to another, "No human has passed the trial. He will be bones before the second sun." Chief Garzul continued. "He will be taken into the scarred wilds, with no weapon, no food. If he survives 3 suns, he may return. But none return. The beasts there are hungry, especially the Skarnak." The name made the warriors quiet. Even the wind seemed to stop for a moment. Daniel didn't know what a Skarnak was, but he understood it was bad. Very bad. 2 guards untied him. One shoved a water flask into his hands. That was all they gave him. No knife, no shoes, no armor. A large Korun with green tattoos pushed him toward the wilderness. "Run, human. Die with some honor." Daniel didn't run. He looked back once at the chief, then walked into the wild land alone. The scarred wilds were not just dangerous. They were angry. The ground was broken and sharp. Strange plants hissed when touched. Small creatures with glowing eyes watched from cracks in the rocks. Daniel moved carefully. His boots had been taken, so he rapped, his feet with torn cloth from his shirt. He found a cave in a cliff and made it his shelter for the night. His military training kicked in. He used rocks to make fire. He collected dry branches. He filtered his water using sand and cloth. It was not perfect, but it kept him alive. The first night he barely slept. Sounds filled the darkness, growls, heavy footsteps, screams that didn't sound like animals. His heart pounded, but he stayed still, gripping a sharp rock in his hand like a weapon. On the second day, Daniel climbed to higher ground. He needed to see the land. From the top of a hill, he spotted the signs of a large creature. Broken trees, deep tracks, claw marks on stone. Then he saw it. Far in the distance, moving slowly through the valley, was a massive beast. It walked on 4 legs. Its skin was dark and covered in bony plates. Its eyes burned orange, and its tail smashed trees as it passed. The Skarnak. Daniel ducked low and didn't move until it was gone. Fear gripped his chest, but another feeling grew inside him, determination. "If that thing finds me," he whispered, "I'll be ready." He spent the day making traps. He dug holes, sharpened sticks, and tied vines into snares. He couldn't kill the beast in a straight fight, but maybe he could outsmart it. While searching for more supplies, he heard a strange sound, a whimpering noise. Behind a rock, he found a small, furry creature caught in a spiked plant. Its leg was bleeding. Daniel hesitated. Helping it could attract danger. But he didn't walk away. He freed the creature, wrapped its wound, and gave it some water. The creature blinked at him with big eyes, then limped away into the bushes. That night, Daniel heard something outside his cave. He picked up his sharp rock and waited, But it wasn't the Skarnak. The small creature had returned. It dropped a bundle of roots near the fire and curled up nearby. Daniel smiled. Guess we're both trying to stay alive. On the third day, things changed. The ground shook. Birds flew away. Daniel looked out and saw dust rising in the distance. The Skarnak was coming. It had smelled him. He grabbed his tools, his sharpened sticks, and ran. His traps weren't ready, but he had one last chance, a narrow ravine nearby with unstable rocks. He ran as fast as he could, the creature close behind. The earth trembled under its steps. It roared, a deep sound that shook the sky. Daniel reached the ravine and jumped across. The Skarnak followed. As it entered the gap, Daniel pushed with all his strength. The rocks above, weakened by time, broke free. With a crash like thunder, they fell onto the beast. Dust filled the air. The ground stopped shaking. Daniel waited. Nothing moved. He crawled down, coughing. The Skarnak lay crushed, its glowing eyes dark. Its bone armor was cracked and broken. Daniel fell to his knees, tired, bleeding, but alive. He had survived. Daniel Rourke sat in the dark cave, his body battered and aching. His legs were covered in bruises, and his hands were raw from making traps and holding weapons. But despite the pain, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. He had survived the Skarnak. He looked down at the dead beast's broken body. The monster's thick bone plates glistened in the dim light of the cave. The Skarnak, the terror of the wilds, was dead, and it had fallen because of him. Daniel knew that he had to do something with the carcass. The bones would help him survive the rest of the trial. But more than that, he had a feeling that this wasn't just about survival. The Karun had a tradition, a harsh tradition, about respect and strength. If he returned wearing the bones of the Skarnak, he would force them to see him in a way they never had before. He had no choice but to make this work. The next day, Daniel began his work. He used rocks, sticks, and sharp bone fragments to carve away pieces of the Skarnak's armor. He pulled off large plates and used the bones to fashion makeshift armor. He tied the bones to his body with vines and thick cords made from plants he had found in the wild. His fingers were bleeding, but he pushed on. The pain in his hands and arms felt like nothing compared to the wild fear he had experienced during the fight. Every movement, every breath, was a victory. By midday, Daniel had finished. He looked at himself in the reflection of a shallow pool of water. The Skarnak's skull rested on his shoulders like a crown. His chest was covered in the beast's bones, giving him a dark, intimidating look. The bones were tough, like armor, and he could feel the weight of the creature's power still in them. He was no longer just a human. He was something else now. With his new armor in place, Daniel took a moment to rest and gather his strength. The wilds had given him no mercy, but he had learned to survive. Now he would take what he had earned. He wouldn't be just another weak human in the eyes of the Karun. He would show them that humans had strength beyond their understanding. The journey back to the Karun's stronghold would not be easy, but Daniel wasn't afraid anymore. His mind was sharp, his body strong, and his spirit unbroken. As he made his way back to the Karun village, the air grew heavier. The sky darkened, and the winds picked up, swirling around him as if nature itself was aware of what had happened. The world seemed to hum with a quiet anticipation. He knew the Karun would not expect him. They would think he was dead, just like all the others who had taken the trial of dust and bone. But Daniel was no ordinary man. He had proven that already. After hours of walking through the desolate land, he reached the village. The Karun warriors were gathered in a large open area, waiting for the return of the failed trial participants. They would be expecting the bodies of the humans who had been sent to die. What they would get instead was a man wearing the Bones of the Skarnak. Chief Garjul stood at the front of the crowd, his arms crossed, a dark scowl on his face. He was watching the horizon, expecting nothing but death. When Daniel appeared, the crowd fell silent. Even Garjul's piercing gaze faltered for just a moment. The Korun saw him first. The human warrior, covered in bones, walking with slow, deliberate steps. The Skarnak's skull hung from his shoulders like a trophy. For a long moment, there was nothing but stillness. The warriors blinked in disbelief. Some began to murmur among themselves, their voices growing louder. Daniel's heart raced, but he kept his posture straight and his eyes on the chief. He had come to show them strength. Not just physical strength, but the strength of will, of survival, of humanity. He stepped forward, ignoring the hushed whispers and shocked faces of the Korun. He stood before Garjul and dropped to one knee. His head bowed respectfully. This was how the Korun respected their warriors. This was the honor they demanded. Daniel would play their game. The chief stared at him, his dark eyes filled with a mix of confusion and curiosity. "You return alive," Garjul finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. "But you return wearing the bones of a Skarnak." Daniel raised his head, his voice clear and steady. "I have passed the trial, Chief Garjul. I killed the Skarnak. And now, I wear its bones as a sign of my strength. This is how your people honor the greatest of warriors, is it not?" The crowd remained silent, but their eyes were locked on Daniel. Some were still unsure. Others were amazed. It was clear that none of them had expected this. Garjul stepped forward. His expression was unreadable. "You are no longer human in the eyes of the Korun. You are Hektar, the untamed victor. This is our tradition, and you have earned it. You will be treated as one of our own." Daniel stood up slowly, still, feeling the weight of the Skarnak's bones on his body. He had done it. He had survived. Not only had he survived, but he had won the respect of the Korun. Now they would see what humanity was capable of. But this was only the beginning. The chief gave a sharp nod and motioned for the warriors to gather around Daniel. The crowd parted, and he was led into the center. The warriors looked at him differently now, no longer with disdain, but with respect. Daniel knew the Korun had a lot to learn about humanity, and he was ready to show them everything they had underestimated. As they led him toward the center of the village, he glanced up at the towering warriors, thinking of how far he had come. This was just the start. The Korun village was silent as Daniel walked through the center, surrounded by warriors. The bones of the Skarnak still adorned his body, but they now carried a deeper meaning. The crowd's eyes were on him, and Daniel could feel their heavy gaze. He had expected them to be shocked, to question him, but what he saw in their eyes now was something different. Respect. As he moved, he noticed the strange mixture of curiosity and fear in the faces of the Korun. They had never seen a human in this light before, and they were unsure what to do with him. Chief Garjul had ordered the ceremony to begin. A warrior who had passed the trial of dust and bone wasn't just given a title, they were tested again. This time, it would be a test of strength. A test of who was worthy to stand with the greatest of the Korun. Daniel had no choice but to face it. The arena of proving was located at the far end of the village, a large open space surrounded by jagged stone walls. The ground was hard and cracked, the earth scarred by centuries of battles. The Korun gathered around the arena, their voices rising in anticipation. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. This was a challenge, not just for survival, but for his place in the eyes of the Korun. The fight would be brutal, but he had already survived far worse. As he entered the arena, he noticed his opponent, a massive Karun warrior named Thorn Kaz. He was taller than most, his skin covered in battle scars, his body wide with muscle. His eyes burned with the fury of a fighter who had never known defeat. Thorn Kaz's weapon was a massive axe, its blade curved and gleaming in the sunlight. Daniel's own weapon was nothing more than a spear made from the sharp bones of the Skarnak, but he would make it work. The Karun warriors gathered around the edge of the arena, shouting their approval. Garjul stood high above the crowd, his expression unreadable. He had commanded this fight, but it was clear he was interested in the outcome. Would Daniel prove to be a worthy warrior, or would he be crushed under the might of Thorn Kaz? Fayez. Signal was given, and the battle began. Thorn Kaz moved quickly for a warrior his size. His axe swung in a wide arc, aiming for Daniel's head. The human ducked, barely avoiding the blow, and rolled to the side. The crowd gasped in surprise. The Karun were not used to seeing such speed from a human. Daniel's heart raced, but his mind remained clear. He gripped his bone spear tightly, keeping it low to the ground. Thorn Kaz swung again, but this time Daniel was ready. He sidestepped and drove the tip of the spear into Thorn Kaz's side. The warrior roared in pain, but the blow was shallow, barely scratching the Karun's thick hide. Thorn Kaz retaliated with a furious roar, charging at Daniel with the full force of his body. Daniel barely had time to react. He dropped to the ground, rolling under the charging Karun and coming up behind him. In one swift motion, he drove the spear into the back of Thorn Kaz's knee, forcing him to the ground. The crowd gasped again. Daniel's breath came in sharp gasps, his muscles burning from the effort. But he knew he couldn't stop now. He had to keep moving, keep fighting. He couldn't let the Karun see him as weak. Thorn Kaz, however, was far from finished. The giant warrior rolled and pushed Daniel back with one hand, sending him crashing to the ground. Thorn Kaz was on his feet in an instant, his axe raised above his head. Daniel had only a moment to react. He rolled to the side just as Thorn Kaz's axe smashed into the earth, missing him by inches. The blow sent a shower of dirt into the air. Daniel staggered to his feet, his mind racing. He was outmatched in strength, and Thorn Kaz's attacks were relentless. But he had something the Karun didn't. Strategy. Daniel feinted left, then moved right, staying out of range of the axe's blade. He used his speed to his advantage, waiting for the perfect moment. And when it came, he struck. Thorn Kaz swung, his axe again, but Daniel was already moving, ducking under the blow and driving his spear into the warrior's side once more. This time the spear found a weak point in Thorn Kaz's armor, and the giant warrior let out a grunt of pain. The Karun roared in fury, swinging his axe with such force that the air itself seemed to tremble. Daniel barely managed to leap back, the blade missing him by mere inches. His chest was heaving with exhaustion, but his eyes were locked on his opponent. The battle continued, the two warriors circling each other like predators. Thorn Kaz's strength was unmatched, but Daniel's speed and determination were wearing him down. He could see the weariness starting to show in the Karun's movements. The giant warrior was no longer as fast as he had been. Daniel saw his chance. Thorn Kaz's swing was wide and slow. With a burst of strength, Daniel ducked under the blow and thrust his spear into the warrior's chest. It was a deep, precise strike, and Thorn Kaz's eyes widened in shock. The giant warrior stumbled back, his axe falling to the ground. Daniel stepped back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The arena fell silent. The Karun looked on in stunned silence. Thorn Kaz collapsed to his knees, his body unable to hold up any longer. He let out one last roar before crumpling to the ground, defeated. Daniel stood over him, his chest rising and falling with every breath. His body ached, his muscles burned, but he had won. Not through brute force, but through skill, patience, and strategy. He had proven that he was more than just a man. He was a warrior. The Koroon slowly began to chant, "Hektar! Hektar!" The sound filled the air, echoing off the walls of the arena. Daniel had earned their respect. He had earned his place among them. Chief Garjul stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Daniel. For the first time, there was no anger in his gaze, only respect. "You have proven your worth, human. You are Hektar. You have earned the right to stand among us." Daniel nodded, his heart swelling with pride. This was just the beginning. He had come to the Koroon to survive. Now he had become one of them. Jace's heart pounded as he watched the monsters surround them. The last battle had been brutal, but this time, there were more of them. Too many to count. The sound of the Xeraphids clicking their sharp mandibles echoed through the jungle. It was a sound that sent chills down Jace's spine. "They're closing in." Thea's voice was tight with fear, but she stood tall beside him. Her eyes were fixed on the advancing horde of monsters. "Stay close." "We move fast," Jace ordered, scanning the area for any way out. He could feel the weight of the twins' eyes on him. Kavi, still holding his hand, looked up at him with trust, while Lyri stayed close to her mother. The fear in their eyes was clear, but they didn't say a word. They knew it was up to Jace to get them out alive. Jace gripped his rifle tightly, his knuckles white. The remaining Xeraphids were moving in on all sides. There was no way to fight them all. But Jace had a plan. He had to keep them moving and make it to the outpost. That was their only chance. "We moved to the east, towards the hills," Jace said. "It's the only way." He didn't wait for a response. He started moving, his eyes never leaving the monsters. They were fast, but he was faster. He led the way, his mind calculating every move, every step. The monsters were closing in, but he couldn't stop now. Not when the twins were depending on him. The jungle grew thicker as they moved, the trees closing in around them. Jace kept his pace steady, though every muscle in his body ached. The weight of the rifle felt heavier with each step, but he couldn't afford to slow down. Behind him, he heard the twins' footsteps, soft and quick. Thea was struggling more than the children, but she kept up, her face set with determination. She hadn't complained once, despite the pain she was in. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the clicking sounds grew louder. The Xeraphids were getting closer. Jace's heart raced as he glanced over his shoulder. He could see them now, dozens of them, moving like a wave, their red eyes glowing in the shadows. "We need to make it to the outpost," Jace called out. "We're almost there," but he wasn't sure if they would make it. A shrill cry echoed through the trees, and Jace didn't hesitate. He turned to the side, firing his rifle at the first Xeraphid that came into view. The creature stumbled back, its legs twitching before it collapsed. But Jace didn't stop. He moved faster, urging the group forward. The monsters were closing in. "Uncle Jace!" Kavi's voice was filled with panic. Jace's heart skipped a beat as he looked back to see a group of Xeraphids closing in on the twins. They were moving. "Too fast! Too many to fight off! Get behind me!" Jace shouted, positioning himself between the children and the approaching monsters. He raised his rifle again, but there were too many. He was only one man. How was he going to protect them all? The first monster lunged at him, but Jace was ready. He ducked, and with a swift movement, he drove his blade into the creature's chest. It screeched and fell to the ground, but more were coming. There was no time to celebrate the victory. "Keep moving!" Jace shouted, turning to Thea. "Take them and run!" But she shook her head, her face pale. "I can't leave. You behind?" Jace felt a surge of anger and frustration. "You have to! We don't have time to fight them all! Go now!" Reluctantly, Thea turned and pulled the twins forward, running as fast as she could. Jace turned back to face the monsters, his heart heavy. He had to hold them off, at all costs. The Xeraphids were closing in, their sharp claws clicking on the ground. Jace could feel the weight of the battle bearing down on him. He fought like a man possessed, slashing, stabbing, and firing. But no matter how many he killed, there were always more. The creatures kept coming, their numbers endless. A monster lunged at him from the side, knocking him to the ground. His rifle flew from his hands and he reached for his knife. The Xeraphid's claws scraped across his armor, but Jace twisted, driving his blade deep into the creature's neck. It collapsed on top of him, its body heavy and still. Jace pushed it off, gasping for air. He was covered in sweat and blood, his body ached, and his vision blurred with exhaustion. But he couldn't stop. He had made a promise. He had to keep them safe. Through the haze of battle, Jace saw a flash of movement. It was Thea and the twins. They had reached the outpost, but they weren't safe yet. There were still too many monsters in their path. "No!" Jace shouted, trying to get to them. But his body refused to obey. His legs felt like lead, his movements sluggish. He had to get to them, but before he could take another step, a massive Xeraphid emerged from the trees. Its body was twice the size of the others, its red eyes glowing with hunger. It roared, its sharp claws raised high. Jace knew it would kill him in seconds if he didn't stop it. With the last of his strength, Jace charged at the monster, his knife raised. The creature swung its claws down at him, but Jace ducked and sliced across its stomach. The Xeraphid howled in pain, but it wasn't enough to stop it. Jace's heart raced as he realized he was too slow. It was going to kill him, but just as the creature raised its claws for the final strike, a shot rang out. The monster screeched and collapsed, dead before it could land the blow. Jace looked up to see Thea, holding a rifle with trembling hands. She had come back for him. "You're not alone, Jace. We're in this together." Thea's voice was shaky, but it was filled with determination. She had saved him, just in time. Jace smiled weakly, his body finally giving in to the exhaustion. But they had made it. They were alive, and they had each other. The outpost was broken and quiet. Old metal walls stood half buried in vines. Parts of the roof had fallen, and strange plants grew through the cracks in the floor. But to Jace, it looked like hope. He leaned against the doorway, breathing hard. His clothes were torn. Blood, dirt, and sweat covered him. His legs were weak, and his right arm was barely moving. Still, he stood like a shield. Behind him, Thea helped the twins climb through a broken section of wall. Kavi held her hand tightly, and Leary clung to her side, both silent after what they had seen. "Inside," Jace said, his voice low but steady. "Stay quiet." They entered the dark building. The power was long gone, but Jace had a flashlight. Its beam lit up broken computers, rusted tools, and cracked windows. It smelled like dust and old oil, but it was shelter. "Rest here," he said. "I'll check the rooms." Thea nodded, guiding the twins to sit on a bench that had fallen sideways. Jace disappeared into the shadows, moving slowly, blade in hand. He cleared every room. No monsters, no survivors, just silence. He returned 20 minutes later and dropped his bag on the floor. "Clear," he said. "We'll stay here tonight." Thea looked at him with concern. "You need rest, Jace. You're hurt." "I've been hurt worse," he replied with a weak smile. But the truth was different. Jace could feel his body failing. Cuts on his back burned with infection. His left shoulder had a deep wound from the last battle. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and the pressure of keeping everyone alive was heavier than any weapon. Still, he sat down beside the twins and pulled out a small ration pack. He gave them water, then handed Leary a small protein bar. Kavi tried to give his back to Jace, but Jace shook his head. "I'll eat later," he said. "Promise?" Kavi asked. Jace nodded. "Promise." That night, while the others slept, Jace stayed awake. He stared at the stars through a broken window. The sky over Virelion 9 was strange. Red clouds drifted slowly, shooting stars flew by often, and there were no moons. Jace sat in silence, lost in thought. Years ago, he had a daughter. Her name was Mila. She was only 6 when the enemy attacked Titanus base. Jace had been away on a mission. By the time he returned, it was too late. Mila, his wife, and everyone else were gone. Since then, he had lived with guilt. Every mission felt empty. Every victory meant nothing. But now things were different. He looked back at the twins. They were sleeping close to Thea, breathing softly. He didn't know if he would survive this mission, but he knew one thing. He wouldn't. Let these children die like his own did. The next morning came fast. The jungle outside was full of strange noises, birds, insects, and maybe monsters. Jace woke the others early. "We move today," he said. "If the distress beacon in this outpost still works, we can call for help." "But what if it doesn't?" Thea asked. "Then we walk the last 20 kilometers to the old comm tower. Either way, we keep moving." He found the beacon half buried under fallen crates. It was damaged but had some power left. Jace spent hours fixing wires, replacing fuses, and cleaning the signal dish. His hands bled from cuts, but he kept working. Finally, the small screen lit up. "Signal, weak, message sent." "It's working?" Thea asked, her voice hopeful. Jace nodded. "Maybe, but we won't wait here. If help comes, good. If not, we finish this ourselves." They left the outpost by mid-afternoon. Jace carried Leary on his back. Her leg had twisted the day before. Thea held Kavi's hand, though she herself limped from her earlier injury. The jungle ahead was even more dangerous. Strange red plants grew tall. Some spit acid. Some wrapped around anything that moved. Jace cut a path with his blade. He was weak, but his will was strong. Every time he wanted to stop, he looked back at the twins and kept going. They crossed rivers with strong currents. Jace carried everyone across one by one. In one deep swamp, a monster rose from the water, its face covered in mud. Jace stabbed. It threw the head before it could roar. Another 10 Xeraphids attacked near a rocky hill. Jace killed them all with a broken spear and fire bombs made from old fuel. The battle left him coughing and shaking, but they survived. At sunset, they stopped under a large fallen tree. Thea cleaned Jace's wounds with water and leaves. He flinched in pain, but didn't complain. "You've killed nearly 200 of them," she whispered. "How do you keep going?" Jace looked at her with tired eyes. "Because no one else will." She placed her hand on his arm. "You're more than a soldier. You're a guardian." He didn't respond, but her words gave him strength. The twins curled up beside him that night. For the first time, Leary fell asleep with a smile. Kavi whispered before sleep, "When we get home, can you come with us?" Jace nodded. "If I make it out, yes." They woke to the sound of thunder, not from the sky, but from the jungle. The Xeraphid hive was moving, hundreds of them. Jace stood tall, blade in one hand, rifle in the other. "They're coming. We run to the tower now. No stops. No fear." "Can we make it?" Thea asked. "We have to." The final march had begun. The ground shook with every step of the approaching monsters. The Xeraphids were coming fast now. The jungle trees shook. Dust fell from the branches. Their screams echoed across the hills. Jace looked at Thea. "Pick up Leary. Hold Kavi's hand. Don't stop. Don't look back." Thea nodded without a word. Her eyes were full of fear, but her hands were steady. She picked up Leary, tightened the straps of the little girl's pack, and grabbed Kavi's hand. Jace turned to face the jungle one last time. Behind those trees were more than 100 Xeraphids. They were bigger now, some taller than the trees themselves. Their armor was thicker. Their eyes were glowing green with rage. Jace's body ached. His wounds were burning. His shoulder barely moved. But inside, his spirit was still sharp. He wasn't afraid. They ran through the jungle. Jace led the way, using a plasma blade to cut through branches and vines. The sun was high, but the sky was dark from the monster's dust storm. The communication tower was still 7 kilometers away. Jace checked his small radar scanner. Red dots blinked all around. "They're closing in." He didn't say it out loud, but he knew. They weren't going to make it unless he slowed the monsters down. He stopped beside a wide tree. "Keep going," he said to Thea. "What?" "No," she cried. "We stay together." Jace shook his head. "I'll catch up. I'll slow them down. You must get to the tower and send the signal again. If you wait for me, we all die." Thaya's lips trembled. Kavi looked at him with wide eyes. "You promise you'll come?" the boy asked. Jace smiled. "I promise, but you have to run. Protect your sister. Protect your mom." Kavi nodded slowly. Then Thaya grabbed Jace's hand. "Don't die," she whispered. As the family disappeared into the thick jungle ahead, Jace pulled out every explosive he had left. He placed traps between trees. He tied grenades to branches. He broke open an old fuel cell and poured it into a small trench. And then he waited. The first Xeraphid came into view, a huge one with 4 legs and long spikes on its back. It sniffed the air, searching for human scent. Jace threw a rock into one of the traps. Boom! The explosion sent fire and metal flying. 3 Xeraphids burned instantly. Others screeched in anger. Then Jace jumped into the chaos. His blade flashed like lightning. His rifle fired burst after burst. One monster after another fell. Blood, black and thick, covered the ground. They surrounded him, but he didn't stop. He moved with purpose. He remembered Mila. He remembered why he was fighting. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a wall between death and life. Meanwhile, Thaya ran as fast as she could. Her lungs burned, her legs shook, but she didn't stop. The tower finally appeared in the distance. It was tall, gray, and cracked, but still standing. "We're almost there," she cried. She reached the main door and pushed it open. The control room was dusty and broken, but one screen still blinked with power. She placed Leary down gently. Kavi helped her find the main panel. "Come on," she whispered, typing the old code. "Please work." A green light blinked. "Connection open. Signal strength, 20%. Back in the jungle, Jace had already killed more than 280 monsters. His body was failing. He could barely lift his blade. Blood poured from his side. Then a huge Xeraphid queen stepped forward. She was twice the size of the others. Her claws were sharp as swords. Her voice let out a scream that shook the earth. Jace took a deep breath and gripped the last explosive, an old fusion grenade. It was unstable, powerful, and deadly. He whispered to himself, "For Mila, and for them." He pressed the trigger and charged straight at the queen. Thea saw the final radar ping vanish. "No," she whispered. Tears filled her eyes. "Jace." But then the signal panel blinked again. Message sent, rescue ship en route. She fell to her knees, holding the twins tightly. "We're going home," she said, her voice shaking. An hour later, a white and blue rescue ship broke through the clouds. Its engines roared. Medics and soldiers jumped out. They found Thaya, Leary, and Kavi sitting quietly at the tower base. All were alive. The officer asked, "Where's the soldier who sent the beacon?" Thea looked into the jungle. "He stayed behind, to make sure we made it." The rescue team flew over the battlefield. There was no sign of life, only burned trees, black blood, and the broken bodies of over 300 Xeraphids. In the center of it all, they found a blood-covered blade and a broken helmet. They brought it back to the ship and gave it to Thaya. She held the helmet in her hands. He kept his promise. Leary and Kavi sat close, hugging her tightly. As the ship flew away, the sun broke through the dark clouds. Far below, the jungle was quiet. The war was over. But the story of one human, a man who fought for 2 children who were not his own, would never be forgotten. He was more than a warrior. He was hope. The rescue ship soared high over the jungle, leaving behind the smoking battlefield. The twins sat quietly near the window. Kavi held Leary's hand tightly, as if afraid she might disappear. Thea sat beside them, holding Jace's helmet close to her chest. Her heart ached. Her mind kept replaying the last time she saw him, standing alone in the jungle, facing the monsters. He saved their lives. He saved her children. Now she wasn't sure if she would ever see him again. Back at Nova 9. Medical base, doctors, and nurses welcomed them. The twins were rushed into care. They were dehydrated, tired, but safe. Thea was checked too, light burns, a twisted ankle, and emotional shock. But she didn't care about her pain. She only asked one question. "Did anyone search the jungle for him?" The officer shook his head. "We found nothing but wreckage." "I'm sorry." Thea clenched her fists. She didn't believe it. "He's not dead." "I know it," he promised. 2 weeks passed. The twins began to smile again. Kavi drew pictures of Jace, fighting monsters, flying ships, saving the day. Leary giggled every time she saw his drawing, but Thea remained quiet. Every night she went outside, looked at the stars, and whispered, "Come back." Then, on the 15th day, a message arrived from Sector D11. Unidentified human male found in jungle ruins. Barely alive. Multiple injuries. Awaiting ID. Thea dropped everything and ran. Jace was lying in a white medical pod. His body was covered in scars, burns, and healing wounds. Tubes ran through his arms. Machines beeped softly, but his heart was beating. Thea stepped closer. "Jace," she whispered. His eyes opened slowly. At first, they were cloudy. Then they focused. He smiled weakly. "You made it." Tears rolled down Thea's cheeks. She laughed and cried at the same time. "You idiot, you said you'd—" "Catch up? What took you so long?" Jace tried to sit up, but pain held him down. "Had to kill a few more bugs on the way?" She smiled and kissed his forehead gently. "We missed you." Days passed. Jace recovered slowly. The twins visited him every morning. Leary brought him small flowers. Kavi told him stories and showed new drawings. One day, Kavi asked, "Do you hurt a lot, Uncle Jace?" Jace smiled and showed his bandaged arm. "A bit. But every scar means I protected someone I care about. So I don't mind." Thea stood behind the kids, watching. Her heart felt full and safe, for the first time in years. Later that week, the High Command of the Human Coalition invited Jace and Thea to the main hall. The room was filled with soldiers, officers, and news reporters. The Admiral stepped forward and said, "This man killed over 300 Xeraphids to protect 2 children. He held the line. He sent the final signal. Without him, this planet would be lost." He handed Jace a medal, the Flame of Earth, one of the highest honors a human could receive. The room applauded. Jace looked uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. But when he saw Thea and the twins clapping for him, he smiled. This wasn't about medals. It was about family. After the ceremony, Thea invited Jace to her new home on the safer side of the planet. It was small but peaceful. Green fields, blue skies, and no monsters in sight. "You don't have to stay in the army," she said softly. "You've done more than enough." Jace looked around. He saw the kids playing in the garden, laughing. He nodded. "I think I'd like to stay, not as a soldier, just as me." Thea smiled. "Good, because we want you here." One evening, Jace sat on the porch watching the sunset. Leary sat in his lap, and Kavi leaned on his shoulder. Thea brought out tea and sat beside them. After a moment of silence, she spoke. "Do you know why I kept your helmet?" Jace looked at her. "Because it's stylish?" She chuckled and shook her head. "Because it's proof. Proof that someone can still choose others over themselves. That someone can still be a hero." Jace looked down at his hands. Scars lined his skin. His knuckles were rough, but his heart felt calm. He looked at her and said, "I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just couldn't let them die. Not them." Thaya reached out and gently touched his hand. "I know," she said, "and that's why every scar you carry is worth it." Months passed. Jace taught Kavi how to fight with a wooden sword. He read bedtime stories to Leary. He built a small training field near the house. He helped local patrols when needed, but never stayed far. He had found something more powerful than war. He had found purpose. Thaya, once broken by loss, now smiled again. She had lost her husband, but she had gained something new, someone who chose her family over everything else. One night, under the stars, Jace sat beside Thaya. He looked at the sky and whispered, "I used to fight because I had nothing left. Now, I fight because I have everything to protect." Thaya turned to him, her eyes full of light. "You don't have to fight anymore," she said. "You're home now." Jace looked at the small house, the glowing windows, the laughter of children. Inside, he smiled and whispered, "Yeah, I am.